What's the most likely record for Oregon this year? Well, it's at least 10 wins.
You are Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Oregon Ducks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, it is that time once again for Locked On Ducks. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view of the day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and your number one source to stay up to date with the Ducks, which is why, if you have not already, please like, comment, subscribe, rate, and review wherever you listen to or watch the show, which today is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Make every moment more. We don't have playoffs right now, but there's Major League Baseball, college football's around the corner, and this summer, FanDuel's hooking up all customers with a booster or bonus daily. That's right, there's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. That's my guy, Max Torres, Scoop Duck, the Ducks Dish podcast. Does a great job, friend of the program here, and this is a program podcast, of course. But I want to look big picture here, Max, because I have not yet made my official season prediction. I'm not asking you to do so. I do think it is far more likely than not that Oregon gets to 10 wins. I think 12 is actually more likely than 10. But for Oregon to win fewer than 10 games this year, it feels like a lot of things would have to go wrong because of how this schedule shakes out.
Yeah, I think I would definitely be on that side of thinking, along those lines of thinking, Spencer. I think 10 games feels like a reasonable floor for this Oregon team, just with how they've been building, the pieces they got in the transfer portal, Dan Lanning's evolution as a head coach, which I think plays a huge part into just the outlook for Oregon. Because I think when I look at Lanning, not to go on too much of a tangent here, but when I look at Lanning and I look at his predecessor, Mario Cristobal, the biggest thing I think that we want to see with Dan Lanning is maybe two parts. You know, has he proven to be more of an asset than a liability as an in-game coach? I think I want to say yes, but a little bit hard to tell right now as far as just big decisions that he has to make. And then just also, what was the other point I was going to make? Oh my God, I completely forgot, but we're going to keep rolling with it.
It happens to the best of us.
We're going to keep rolling with it. I think 10 games is definitely a reasonable floor for Oregon. I think that they have the quarterback to do it. They have the trench play to do it. My biggest question is going to be, how does that secondary ultimately shape up? And can it prove to be significantly better than what it was last year? Because honestly, I think that's really kind of what held Oregon back at times. We saw those two losses to Washington, who had some of the very best wide receivers in the country. Michael Penix was a phenomenal quarterback to go against, but the secondary just wasn't enough, wasn't what it needed to be for Oregon to really be a top-tier team. So it feels like a lot would have to go wrong, some injuries, some calls not breaking their way, but I think that 10 wins is more than realistic for Oregon, and I'm with you. I think I'm on the over pretty heavily.
Yeah, I think 10 wins as a floor is where Oregon's expectations should be going into the season. Their win total, according to our friends at FanDuel, is 10.5. That's tied for the highest in all of college football. And the schedule breaks very favorably. You don't have an incredibly daunting non-conference slate. Yeah, you got to deal with Boise. You got the Civil War in Corvallis, but Oregon should be able to win those games by double digits. I think Boise actually could be tougher than Oregon State this year. But I think for the Ducks and the way that they've built this roster, as you talked about, all the pieces are there. And I know the pass defense, in the minds of a lot of fans, they just go back to the Washington games. But there is not a single passing offense on this Oregon schedule that is anywhere close to what Oregon saw last year. And heck, I don't even know if there's one in the country. Like, find me the team that has a first-round a top 10 quarterback, a top 10 receiver, and two other receivers who go in, I think, the second and third rounds. Where is that team on Oregon's schedule? Where is that team in the entire country? And so I think last year's secondary gets a little bit of a bad rap in that sense, in that, well, they couldn't beat that team. Like, well, you know, John Stockton and Karl Malone couldn't beat Michael Jordan. Does that mean they weren't actually good enough to win a championship? No, it means they just couldn't beat Michael Jordan in that and Scottie Pippen in that particular year, and our UN ambassador Dennis Rodman. I'm pretty sure that's his title. But I think for Oregon, they're in a good spot. But I like what you brought up about Lanning, because when you compare him to Mario Cristobal in his first full year as a head coach, there were some highs and then there were some very low lows. But then the next year, there were a lot more highs, then there were lows, but there were still a couple of low points, but he got better. Then it felt like in 2021, it looked like he'd taken a step forward going into Columbus and beating Ohio State. But then as the season played out, we saw, nope, kind of feels like they're taking a step backwards here. And that's where I'm really curious to see how Lanning executes game plans, in-game decision making, how he progresses as a head coach, how he and his staff work together. This might be the most staff continuity he has in his entire tenure at Oregon, however long it ends up being. I think this is a pretty big prove-it year for Dan Lanning if he wants to move truly into that upper echelon of head coaches, not just as a recruiter, but as an in-game coach. This is a really good season to do it.
It's a great time to make a statement if you're Dan Lanning. And I remembered the other point that I completely blanked on, Spencer, in my last answer. And I think it kind of gets into a little bit of what you're saying. This is the year for Dan Lanning to get his marquee win at Oregon, because I don't think he has one yet. And that's not a slight to Dan Lanning. All you can do is play the games in front of you. I think right now, if you're looking for the best win, what are you looking at? Maybe the UCLA game, the BYU game, and that's just.
I would look at last year's Utah game in Salt Lake, or frankly, his first year. That win against Utah, mighty impressive.
That's fair. That's fair. I think the first win over Utah was definitely huge. I think that
because Bo Nix was playing with one leg.
Yeah, no, that was big for sure. I think the point that I was going to make as far as last year's Utah win, I think it was huge. You know, Oregon going into Salt Lake and winning at Rice-Eccles, that's just not something a lot of teams do. But what did that Utah team become down the line? I think that they were
8-4.
Yeah, that's true. But I'm just saying that I think when you look at the how much hype there was around Utah when Oregon won versus how their season unfolded, to me, it makes. I'm not saying I want to take away from the win, but it doesn't carry as much weight as I think you would like it to. Obviously, Oregon would have loved to beat Cam Rising-led Utah in Salt Lake City.
Yeah, that's true.
That's just not what happened. So all I'm saying is I think you have an opportunity to get, if he hasn't already gotten one, maybe you're in the camp of Oregon already having a marquee win or Dan Lanning. I think you have one on the schedule this year. Obviously, October 12th against Ohio State is a great opportunity. Michigan is a great opportunity. You want to go into Wisconsin and beat the Badgers and Camp Randall. That's another opportunity. Washington, even though they've obviously lost a lot. So that was kind of the point that I was trying to get at is I feel like it's not a murderer's row schedule, but there's definitely some tough games on there. And I think if Dan Lanning can get his guys to continue showing up and prove to be a major asset, I think he's already an asset as an in-game head coach, but Oregon's beating the brakes off of so many of their opponents. It's a little bit harder to get a true feel for that. So I think that you've got an opportunity to make a statement if you're Dan Lanning in 2024.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Real quick, let's say Oregon only hits their floor, not their ceiling. I think the ceiling is 12-0, floor is 10-2. That would make your most likely record 11-1 if you're thinking along those lines, and I think that's a very valid prediction. That's what Josh Pate of CBS Sports has Oregon going this year. If they go 10-2, and both losses would probably be in Big Ten play, like let's say they lose to Ohio State and Michigan, your instant reaction, 10-2, is Oregon in the playoff?
I think so. I think that if you're going to critique Oregon's losses, you're probably going to be more critical of Michigan, just because I think Ohio State looks like they're going to be the better team.
Yep, this year. Should be.
But yeah, 10-2. If you go 10-2 in the regular season, I think, and you can make the playoff at that, I think that there's going to be some contingent of Oregon fans that are like, dang, this is an underwhelming year as far as the regular season goes. But if you can make the playoff at 10-2 in your first season in the Big Ten, you also have to think that you have a bigger margin for, or realize, I should say, you have a bigger margin for error with the expanded playoff, and you're playing in a better conference, even though the Pac-12 was damn good last year, Spencer.
Pac-12 was the deepest conference in the country last year.
Definitely. So I think 10-2, to a degree, it would be a disappointment, but I think you have to look at this Oregon team and say there's no way they don't at least make the playoff. That's got to be an expectation.
I think as long as Ohio State is undefeated, that loss wouldn't be very punitive, and if Michigan is at least a 9-win team, I think you'd be in a really, really good spot to say, like, yeah, they lost on the road against Michigan, and yeah, they were at home, but it's Ohio State, and Ohio State's, undefeated, number one in the country, or whatever they'd be at that time. I think more than likely it gets them in. I don't think it's a guarantee. You win 11 regular season games, you're locked to the playoff. You win 10, you should be in. You win 9, you're probably not. That's kind of where things sit. Max and I are going to change gears a little bit and talk about the good old recruiting trail, because my guy is locked in forever and always on the trail. What comes next for Oregon in the 2025 cycle? That's coming up next. First, let's talk about FanDuel. They have everything. Okay, I paused there to emphasize the point. They have everything. They've got Oregon's win total. They've got individual game matchups. They've got conference title odds. They've got national championship odds. Everything that you could possibly want. It's all over there at FanDuel. And guess what? This summer, FanDuel's hooking up customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Win totals. You can bet more than just Oregon. They've got the entire world of college football over there. Games, spreads, win totals, conference title, national title, make the playoff, miss the playoff. Oregon's up to a minus 300 favorite to make the playoff. That's a big number. That is a big, big number. So head over to FanDuel.com, start making the most out of your summer and what's left, and get ready for the college football season as well, which is right around the corner. FanDuel.com, that's the place to go. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. All right, rolling back along with my guy, Max Torres, second segment sip, inspired and all. Let's flip over to the trail. This Oregon 2025 recruiting class has had some highs, they've had some lows, and overall, it's a high. This is a top 10 class at the moment, number 9 in the 24/7 Sports Composite as we're recording this show. And right now, there's been an utter lack of buzz. There has not been much attention paid to Oregon on the recruiting trail lately because there hasn't really been any news. I follow it, but you cover it even closer than I do. What's with the quiet period right now? When should Oregon fans expect it to pick back up?
We're just at a weird part in the recruiting calendar, Spencer. If you look at what happened in the summer, June was official visit month for basically, 85% of these rising seniors that we're focusing on in the 2025 class. And Oregon got a pretty good amount of commitments, but then they had some decommitments, which I think fans haven't gotten super used to in the Dan Lanning era. But I think right now we're still in a little bit of a dead/quiet period. So I think visits are probably going to pick up again in September. Like you said in the intro there, Oregon has a really quality class. I know they're top 5 for us over at On3. So I think the as far as things picking up, got a couple guys that we can focus on here, Spencer. The first one being 5-star Galveston, Texas ball safety Jonah Williams. He's set to make his college announcement on August 24th. I currently have my prediction over at On3 on the Ducks, but based on some of the latest that I've been hearing, I think that one is trending away from Oregon. So wouldn't be surprised if I ended up changing that pick to what school. I'm not sure just yet. Rather, I think A&M, Texas A&M, and LSU, as well as Texas, are some of the ones that you got to keep an eye on there. I think Oregon still looks really good in the secondary, especially after adding Trey McNutt, who we might talk about a little bit later. And then the other one you want to keep an eye on, if we're just staying in the Lone Star State in the 25 cycle, is Michael Terry, the nation's #1 athlete out of San Antonio, Texas, Alamo Heights. You have Oregon, Texas, and Nebraska in the mix there. But for all intents and purposes, I think that one's Oregon versus Texas. And it seems like Texas might have the slight edge right now, but he doesn't have a finish line, a commitment date set for his recruitment. So I think that the longer that one goes on, I don't want to say that it trends towards Oregon, but I think you just keep it open. You can have a good season, hopefully get him back on campus for a game atmosphere, and then Junior Adams, Rashad Samples, whatever position you want to put him at, tight end, maybe even Drew Maringer. I think that they're going to have the Ducks in contention there until the very end.
Yeah, very versatile player. I think he's one of the biggest names out there just because maybe Oregon, not just because he's a 5-star recruit, but because Oregon might want to use him as a tight end in that class positionally. Because I've talked about this before. You have Deshaun Brame flip away to Tennessee. Lincoln Cure went to Kansas State. Maybe they try and flip his commitment going into signing day because the tight end room is going to see a lot of turnover after this year. They do have some names, right? They have AJ Pugliano and Roger Saliapaga in the 2024 class. You've got Kenyon Sadiq, who's probably going to be tight end 1 going into 2025, but there aren't that many great tight ends available in the transfer portal. It's just not a position. All the talk about how many players go in the portal, warranted. A bunch go in. How many times do you see a high-end impact tight end move? I mean, Benjamin Jurasik went from Stanford to Georgia this offseason. That's probably one of the biggest tight end moves in the portal in the last couple of years. Carson Ryan, I think is the guy's name, went from UCLA to Utah. He's going to have a nice season up there in Salt Lake, but he won't even be the number 1 guy. Like Maliki Matavat went from Oregon to UCLA. He wasn't even the number 1 guy. Like you just don't have. When they brought in Kelly from Ole Miss ahead of the 23 season, he was just kind of a guy. Like it's not a position rich, or it's not a position that gives a lot of talent in the portal every year, which is why I think they need to recruit it. So if you're talking about flip candidates come December, I wonder if Lincoln Cure isn't at the top of their list.
He'd definitely be up there. I think that Noah McHale is another one I would definitely put there for Oregon, especially because he's from Southern California. And we know that California has been a foundational state for Oregon year after year. That's the guy that I had tabbed to go to Oregon. I had my prediction in. I felt good about it. And then he took his official visit to A&M, and that was the last official visit that he took. And the buzz was kind of coming out on the Aggies, and he ended up picking A&M and Mike Elko. But I feel like Oregon's definitely going to stay in the mix there for him, seeing that they don't have any linebackers committed right now. All their top linebacker targets, Spencer, are committed to other schools, which is just a weird position to be in. Definitely not where the staff wants to be, but that's the reality of it. When you go big game hunting, you're gonna have yourself in that kind of a situation. So Noah McHale's up there. Lincoln Cure is definitely up there. I really see him as a hard guy to flip, seeing that he's from the state of Kansas.
Naeem Offord has got to be up there.
Yeah, maybe. I haven't heard too much about him in the past. I mean, recently, I should say, I'm still kind of getting out of my vacation, habits, which, I wasn't working obviously on vacation. So I got to make some calls. I think Oregon feels pretty good about where they're at with some of these guys, especially in the secondary. Naeem Offord is someone to keep an eye on. I think you can definitely keep tabs on him. I think Adonis Curry is another one. He's committed to Texas A&M, and he's from Southern California. So I just like Oregon's chances better historically with guys from Southern California versus Alabama. But if he's willing to hear him out and they're going to continue recruiting him, then why not? Because I think Oregon's defense is going to be special again this year with Jabbar Muhammad leading the way at corner.
Yeah, I think their DB room is good enough. I think their defensive line is the best in 10 years. But when you look at that defensive back room, going to be a lot of turnover after this year, which is why Oregon has recruited it pretty well in the last couple cycles. Seems like they're ratcheting up their efforts in 25. There was an article floating around about Trey McNutt maybe visiting Ohio State, which is not unheard of for a guy to do after he's verbally committed somewhere. Of course, the Buckeyes are one of the teams that are trying to get Trey McNutt, or were going into his verbal commitment. The whole ordeal with the video to me came off as, okay, this guy is locked in, but I've seen a couple different individuals, articles, rumors, whatever about, Trey McNutt. Do you feel like he's fully locked into the Ducks, the 5-star DB in the class of 2025?
I feel like Trey McNutt's pretty solid with Oregon right now, Spencer. He's not one of those guys that I find myself to be too worried about, but maybe that's because he just made a recent commitment, so it's still pretty fresh. But I think he's been a guy that I've felt was going to end up at Oregon for a while. I thought that was they were the team to beat coming out of On3 Elite, which was back in late May. But at the same time, let's not kid ourselves, Spencer. He's a top guy from Ohio. It's not a difficult trip to make. His dad's an Ohio State legacy, so there's some history there. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up taking a visit. I think that was the only finalist that he didn't take an official visit to. And I was talking to my guy, Mick Walker, over at Letterman Row, the Ohio State On3 site, and he had been telling me that the plan all along had been to visit Ohio State during the season. But heading into that decision, we weren't talking about the Buckeyes as the team that was Oregon's biggest competition. It was Texas A&M. So maybe it'll unfold a little bit differently as things go moving forward here. I wouldn't be surprised if he took a visit because of geography and because of the previous relationships there. But I haven't heard anything lately to make me think that Trey McNutt is going to be flipping to Ohio State. But that said, we got 4 months until the early signing period. So that's an eternity, an eon in terms of recruiting.
Yeah, Oregon's 25 class, 14 commits right now. I imagine that number gets close to 20 at the very least. I don't know if they get way over 20. I wouldn't be surprised, frankly, with the size of their last two classes and the player retention rate in those two recruiting classes if they stay under 20 and end up around maybe 18 or 19 players. But we're going to bounce back to the football field for 2024. Max has got 3 breakout players that he's just dying to tell me about. He's going to tell you all too, coming up next. After, of course, I tell all of you about Game Time. Game Time is an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to first pitch, which is really great for all of you. They have killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, their lowest price guarantee. Game Time just takes the guesswork out of buying Major League Baseball tickets. You can save up to 60% buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, whatever you are looking for, they've got it. You can save even more with exclusive in-app deals on select seats ahead of the game or event. Take the guesswork out of buying Major League Baseball tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE. That's LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Not tomorrow, today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Breakout candidates, Max. The season is very close. 15 days to Oregon football. What do you know? It's a beautiful time to be alive. 3 breakout candidates. Who's your first one? Let's start on the offensive side of the ball. When I say breakout candidate, I mean someone who's going to dramatically alter their impact in a positive way for this Oregon football team that was on the team last year. Like saying, Matthew Bedford is a breakout candidate. Well, that's not really breaking out because he comes in as a transfer with expectations there. Who's a breakout candidate on offense for you?
You're putting some extra
qualifiers
pressure on me because I had a true freshman in mind, but now I can't use that.
No, true freshman. No, true freshman works. True freshman works.
Be there last year.
Well, I made these imaginary rules and I can amend them as I please. It requires a supermajority of 1 vote in my 3 or I don't know what's the square footage on a head. 1 foot by 1 foot, roughly that square footage. And as long as you have all the votes in there, which we do, an amendment can be made. So I accept the true freshman amendment.
Fair enough. Well, if we're starting on offense, I'm gonna have to go with Kenyon Sadiq, the tight end, out of the state of Idaho. Excuse me. I mean, he's kind of the gimme pick there. We'll be honest.
Gimme? Maybe.
I don't know who else. I mean, other than like Evan Stewart and Dylan Gabriel, I don't know who else has had more hype this offseason than Kenyon on offense.
That's a Poncho. Won't be as flashy.
Sure.
But he's going to get the ball to Dylan Gabriel, we hope. Every single play. It's never a problem until it is, like having health insurance. You don't need it until you really, really do. But I think for Sadiq, I love that pick because he's not like any tight end Oregon has ever had. Someone sent me a question about him one time and said, hey, I think the last time we had a tight end that versatile was Colt Lyerla. That's probably the right answer. But Colt Lyerla, Kenyon Sadiq, they're both versatile tight ends. But Max, these two guys are very different football players.
Yeah, so Kenyon Sadiq comes in at 6'3", 245 pounds, and I think that's where you have to start the discussion when you're looking at his offseason, Spencer. This is someone that came to Oregon in the neighborhood of 220 pounds, and the talking points were kind of like, I don't know if his body is necessarily where it needs to be for him to see the field as a true freshman. And fortunately for Oregon, they didn't need to have him on the field as a true freshman. They had Patrick Herbert and Terrence Ferguson. I think Oregon's kind of in the situation this year where they need to have him on the field, not because I think that Terrence Ferguson and Patrick Herbert aren't great players, but you don't want to get to 2025 and say, hey, Kenyon, you want to go be our tight end 1 and not have significant snaps under his belt. And I think he has really transformed his body. He's on the roster listed at 245. So I think that's much healthier in terms of where you want to be in that range, 250, 250 plus sometimes even. He is a little bit shorter than some of the other tight ends on this Oregon roster, but I don't think that that's a negative. This is a guy who has some really good athleticism to his game. I saw he made a catch against Jeffrey Bossa in the last That Team Out West Hard Knocks documentary style that Oregon dropped, and he was pretty fired up. We've seen pictures of him hurdling people. We see him on those little jet sweeps, pop passes that we saw last year a couple times. So I'm really excited just to see how Will Stein gets this guy involved. He's been kind of mentioned in, I can't remember if it was in the same vein or like not compared, but like mentioned in the same sentence as like Travis Kelce or Brock Bowers. Maybe it was both, but the expectations are super high for Kenyon Sadiq. And with the way that coaches most of the time, at least at Oregon, are like pretty guarded with their excitement. I mean, Dan Lanning's obviously the most guarded because he's like the most critical of his team, but whether it's Stein or Merringer, the expectations are in the hype around Kenyon Sadiq.
Well, I mean, it's come from guys in that room. I asked T-Ferg about, the tight end room at Big Ten Media Days, and by the time we got to talking about Sadiq, he said, "Oh, that guy can be better than all of us." I'm like, I'm talking to a guy who's going to get drafted after this year. He's probably one of the top 3 to 5 tight ends in the 2025 NFL draft class. I haven't looked at any rankings. That just kind of be my guess. And like, he's someone who's going to play on Sundays, and he's sitting there saying that guy's going to be better than all of us. Like, that's some pretty high praise. So I love that pick on offense, and there's so many different ways that Sadiq can be used. There are a lot of weapons, so I don't know if he has a massive season, but in 25, when he's tight end 1, he could put up big time numbers and get the ball more, on carries, sweep screens, however they want to get him the football. But I want to go for one defensively, and then I'll give you a choice to pick an offense or defense for your third one, or for the third one of the segment. I'm going to go Devin Jackson here. I keep seeing his name pop up. Questions get asked. Positive answers are given. The speed is there. Lanning, I think, had like several sentences of a quote that he gave on Devin Jackson. And as you know, Max, you're at practice. If you ask Lanning a question and you get several sentences in one of those pressers on a guy, he's got to be legitimately fired up. He doesn't give several sentences on anything.
Yeah, you can. That's kind of how it goes with a lot of coaches. If they're going on for a long time about somebody, it's someone that they think. I think you look at it a couple ways. Someone that you think they're confident is going to live up to that billing, or it's just someone that they really like and they feel like they've earned that attention. Like, I'm thinking about back to my days when I was in Eugene covering the Ducks, asking Marco Cristobal about Braden Swinson. And he knew it was kind of a weird interaction. He knew I was going to ask about, or Braden Swinson, excuse me. I think I said Braden Swinson.
No, you said Braden. You said Braden. Don't worry. My brain is mush at this point.
Who's at LSU. And he was excited. He knew I was going to ask him. He was like, "Oh yeah, no, go for it." Well, he didn't pan out at Oregon, so that's a different story for a different day. But the thing about Devin that I'm just excited about is how he's carrying himself. And it's not I don't think it's a cocky way, because he hasn't really talked to the media that much. I remember talking to him coming out of high school when I was covering him as a recruit, and he was, pretty humble, kind of soft-spoken, good interview, but it just feels like there's a different I'm gonna tap into some of the younger audience here. It seems like he's got aura. Maybe we can talk a little bit about moxie too, Spencer. I know you and I love that word, but is
he brat?
Okay, no. I have someone,
dude. I don't even know what that means.
One of my friends has a funny story with that word, but we're not going to get into that on the podcast. Good. But all that to say, I was watching the Devin Jackson press conference, and it just seems like he's got some really good confidence. And then to your point, Lanning talking about how he's playing fast in the right direction. You can have all that speed, but if you're not in the right place, they're not going to feel comfortable putting you out there on the field. So I love the Devin Jackson pick. I know my guy Jared Mack loves Devin Jackson as well, based on the conversations I've had with him.
Jared is the self-appointed, and I'd vote for him too, leader of the Devin Jackson fan club.
Yes, he is. So that'll be cool. see what he can do this year. I'm excited.
Yeah, I am as well. I think he's the number 3 linebacker pretty clearly. And if you have an injury to Justin Jacobs, which entirely possible, or Jeff Bossa, I think Jackson's the guy that steps up no matter what. Let's wrap with another breakout player. Who's a guy, offense or defense, you go either side of the ball here, that you think really has a big season compared to what he did last year?
I think I'm pretty confidently going to go on defense, just because I look at this roster. I think that's where you have a little bit more of the question marks, or maybe not question marks, but more opportunities through this depth chart. I think so. I'm gonna throw 2 at you just because I want to talk about more of them.
Okay.
This one I think is a little bit of a sleeper, but I'm actually kind of confident in it. Here we go. Marion Winston. At outside linebacker.
Ooh, that is an under the radar pick.
I don't think he's someone that gets talked about a whole lot. It kind of feels
but
like,
when he does get talked about, it's always in the context of he doesn't get talked about enough.
Okay, there we go. So
like he gets talked, you get what I'm saying? Like I've probably said that a dozen times this offseason on this show, or the Odds and Audibles guys, or you, because I think what we're going for is the fans don't think about him as, oh, it's an impact player on defense. But he is. Like, you look at the snap counts last year and you're like, oh, wow, he's playing a pretty good amount.
Yeah, and I think that's a great way to look at it, Spencer, because this Oregon offensive line, they have a lot of star power and some big-time names, right? Mateo Uiagalelei, him playing as much as he did isn't – I mean, there was a lot of excitement around him, but I don't think I was expecting him to be that impactful. That was pretty special. And then now he has a whole year under his belt. Like, things are going to be pretty big. I think he could have been someone that you could talk about, but they want to keep fresh legs on the field and they want to be able to rotate people. And I think when you're looking at that edge rusher spot, outside linebacker, that's a spot that I think Dan Lanning, Tosh Lupoi, they feel confident that they have a legitimate 2 deep there. And that's not something that happens overnight. So I feel like we're going to see Marion Winston make some plays this year, and people are going to have to look at the roster, look at their phone, be like, who's that number 32 guy? Oh, Marion Winston, who, to make it even better, is an Oregonian from Portland, Central Catholic. So his older brother played at Oregon as well, and I think he's someone that's going to be an exciting guy to watch. I don't know if you had any more on him, but I have one more guy I wanted to talk about.
Yeah, I've got a couple of PFS stats. So he was outsnapped by Tatum Tuioti last year by just 12 plays defensively. And of Oregon's edge defenders last year with enough qualified snaps, he had the highest overall Pro Football Focus grade, just a hair above Jordan Birch. And his run defense grade was a full 2.7 points higher than the Jordan Birch's last year, which that's pretty impressive because Birch is a stud. So I like that Marion Winston pick. I think that's a good solid high note. Unless you got another name you wanted to throw out real quick.
Yeah, I got one more I want to throw out there.
Hit me.
It didn't really fall into the criteria, and this might be just a little bit of fandom inside me because I've gotten to cover him. Dakota Fields. I don't think he's necessarily going to have like a huge year. It's a very crowded room, right?
It's a very crowded room.
You have Jabbar Muhammad, Cam Alexander, Dante Manning,
Jaleel Florence, Nico Reed.
Yeah. I wonder if Jaleel Florence is. I'm trying to see what's going on with that.
Yeah, no one really seems to know. Like everyone at Oregon says, he's progressing, he's doing well, he's okay. But then it's, I don't know.
Injuries are always weird. It's like I'll believe it when I see him on the field, unless I hear otherwise. So that's why I'm trying to make some calls. But Dakota Fields has an interesting story. Kind of just some of the conversations that I've been having with some folks close to the program. I was being told that he intercepted Bo Nix a couple times in bowl practice. So I mean, you can put stock into that if you want to, but that was kind of just a cool little tidbit that I had been told. The dude's got the perfect build for this for a cornerback in the Dan Lanning defense. 6'2", 190 pounds. I mean, I had multiple times where I was standing next to this guy. And I'm like, this guy looks like a college corner right now. I'm like about 6 foot, so I'm not like short, but I'm also not a giant.
Yeah, we get it. It's all people. Yeah, okay.
And but yeah, I think that the last detail I'll add with Dakota Spencer, he made a lot of really impressive plays as a high schooler. Also was an impact player as a returner at times, but I don't think that he was coached the way that he maybe should have been. Sarah's a great program. I'm not trying to take any slight there, but I feel like that the difference with him, the thing that's going to make that light switch turn on, is the high level coaching that's at Oregon from Chris Hampton, from Rashad Wadood, who's a Southern California native, as we all know, from Tosh Lapoy. Like, it feels like it's the perfect storm, and he's going to be learning from guys like Jabbar Muhammad, and he's going to be going against a guy like Evan Stewart in practice. So I'm buying stock on Dakota Fields.
Yeah, I might buy that stock higher in 2025. I could see Aaron Flowers making an impact as true freshman because of the depth chart of the safety room, but you absolutely never know. Max Torres, scoopduck.com, and the Ducks Dish podcast. Max, always appreciate the time.
Thanks for having me, Spencer.
Appreciate everyone listening. I'll see you next time. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Go McLaughlin on college football, your second listen of the day. I'll see you then. And until next time, go Ducks.